In today's video, we check out the bike that belongs to Szymon Godziek, the Polish freerider that hits some of the biggest and most gnarly freeride courses out there. Of course, it is a downhill bike, but it's most definitely not set up like one. Okay, so Symon's actually going to take us through the bike himself, but what you need to know is it's an NS Bikes Fuzz, it's a size medium, and he's running an Ohlins suspension front and rear. It's got the TTX22 shock on the rear and that DH38 fork on the front. I'm a huge fan of the fork as it is, but not really spent too much time on the shocks. And interestingly, he doesn't play around with the setup of the rear end too much. He only really changes air pressure factors with the front end.
What's up YouTube, Szymon Godziek here with my downhill bike. This is NS Bikes Fuzz with a medium size frame with Ohlins suspension and Novatec wheels and Continental tires. I used to run my suspension really soft, but before this trip I decided to make it a bit stiffer. In my front fork I pumped the main chamber on 130 psi. The ramp-up chamber goes maximum, which is 250 psi, to make this fork as progressive as possible. The rear shock is 575, which is the maximum which Ohlins has, and it's pretty stiff, but not too much. Still could be stiffer, but I like it this way. When I go downhill, I don't change anything, maybe just a bit softer in the front, but basically it stays like this. So I use this bike on downhill tracks and on big jumps with the same setup. My wheels 27.5 with Continental tires, tubeless and Cushcores in it. Yeah, I run Cushcores because I like them on downhill tracks, and I like to run my bike with less pressure in tires. I usually go 1.6 in front, 1.4 in the back, and then you can shrub the berms easy. For the big jumps, I put 3 bars in my tires. I don't have gears in this bike. I run single speed with SB1 tensioner in the rear. I decided to go single speed because it's easier, lighter, and I don't really need gears. I just go downhill, don't have to pedal. So my NS Bike stem is 40 millimeters long with handlebars, which I haven't cut, and it's pretty wide. It's 780 millimeters wide. Since this year I run Continental tires, which is usually Der Baron on the front and Der Kaiser in the rear. And when it comes to tyre choice, he's running Continental on his bike. Now, unlike a lot of the other freeriders, he actually plays around with his tyre pressure quite a lot, running lower pressure for regular riding and ramps it up really hard for hitting these big jumps. Of course, something that we've seen with a lot of riders at big freeride events is they want the most predictability as possible. It's not so much about out-and-out traction. So he's actually running a Cushcore setup in his wheels as well, which pretty much means they're going to be bomb-proof. And he's running a Kaiser rear tyre, which is the downhill spec tyre, and a Der Baron on the front, which is a bit more of an enduro tyre, but actually a better all-rounder. Now, the Kaiser is extremely stiff, very, very durable, but actually quite a slow tyre. But it's not going to hold him back from hitting jumps like this. Again, like some of the other riders, he's not relying or not needing any gears on his bike at all. He's actually running a single speed setup, one of those SB1 single speed tensioners. Now, essentially, it's like a dummy rear derailleur. It's got an extremely powerful spring in there to take up that tension because, of course, on a downhill bike, there's 2 main factors at hand, which means you can't run a traditional single speed setup. The obvious one is chain growth, because downhill bikes have a huge range of axle movement that does mean it's basically going to have chain growth, so you can't run a single speed chain. And of course the dropouts, they don't have horizontal dropouts. But this is a great solution if you do fancy the single speed life on a big travel bike. Blake actually tried it a couple of years back at Whistler and his bike was completely silent, which was really cool. I mean, you've got to pick the right gearing though, that's essential. But as Simon says, it doesn't really matter for him because he's only pointing this thing down at massive jumps. Oh, well, there you go. That was Szymon Godziek's NS Bikes Fuzz
running those little 27.5-inch wheels. I think it's a really cool bike, and I love the fact he's running at single speed and he's actually talking about tyre pressure and how he runs his suspension. He's obviously very clued up into what he wants from the bike. You know, we've seen a complete variety of bike checks over the last few years. Some racers are really tuned in, others kind of leave it to the mechanics to give them the optimum setup. But well, there you go. That was Szymon Godziek's bike. Let us know if you've got any questions, run them in those comments underneath, and whose bikes would you like to see us check out here on GMBN Tech, because we're planning on visiting as many events as possible in 2021 to make up for that bizarre year we've had over 2020. But thanks for hanging around as always, and we'll see you in the next video.